I thought I was helping an old friend until I watched him force his way into an apartment on video at 10:17 p.m. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it, but just asked, "Who sent it to you?" He then pressured me to lie in court for him. Yesterday, he watched me take the stand and knew exactly what was coming. The day I lied for my best friend was the day everything fell apart. Tyler and I had been best friends since childhood, and he was easily the person I trusted most. We used to build blanket forts together and go hiking together, and he helped me through the toughest part of my life. When I was 17, my dad's drinking got out of control and made the house unsafe. Tyler was the only one who knew what was happening, so he'd let me and my little brother stay at his house. He lied to teachers about why I was absent and would sneak in food for us when our mom locked herself in her room. One night after my dad laid his hands on my mom again, I asked Tyler if he would testify against my dad if I reported him. He said yes, and from there we made a pact. We'd each have a favor that we had to do for the other person, no questions asked. We both swore we'd honor it. I never thought he'd actually call it in. After my dad was arrested, our house finally felt like home. From there, I pursued a career as a hospital administrator and moved into a small apartment with my best friend Dana. Tyler, on the other hand, bounced between cities and jobs and was burning through his money fast. We didn't talk much anymore, but when we did, I was able to forget about the person he was now, and I'd think back to everything he did for me until the call. Tyler called me just after midnight and he sounded panicked. His voice was shaking and I could barely make out what he was saying. He had said his ex Brooke was accusing him of laying his hands on her. He said she was lying and was trying to destroy him. I never thought Tyler would be capable of that, especially after seeing what my mom had to go through with our dad. I was inclined to believe him until he said, "I need you to tell the cops I was with you last night." I asked him why, but said he was cashing in his no questions asked favor that I had promised him years ago. I went silent. My gut told me this was bad. Part of me was already screaming, "Don't do it." I knew doing this meant betraying my mom because she'd gone through this. But then he started talking about how he'd always been there for me, and I knew what kind of person he was, the kind that testified against an offender. He said I owed him this, so even though every part of me knew it was wrong, I said yes. The next day I went to testify at the police station. Detective Rivera interviewed me and he was so calm the entire time it actually made me more nervous. He asked where Tyler had been during the night in question. I told him we'd watched a movie and ordered Thai food. I named a random movie and described the food in detail. I talked too much and too fast, and I saw his pen slow down halfway through his notes. He asked a few more specific questions about what time Tyler had left and which restaurant we ordered from. I answered as if I had nothing to hide, but deep down I knew I had crossed a line. As soon as I left, I called Tyler. I needed to hear him say he was innocent and make it sound believable. Instead, he went into a long-winded explanation about how Brooke was unstable and vindictive. He kept repeating that she was crazy and obsessed with him. I asked why he didn't just tell the truth if he had nothing to hide, and he suddenly changed the subject. I didn't press further because that would mean accepting what I had done to the fullest extent. The next morning, I woke up to 3 texts from unknown numbers. They all said that they'd seen Tyler outside Brooke's apartment building the night of the incident. I sent the screenshots to Tyler hoping he'd tell me they were fake. He didn't hesitate telling me Brooke had put people up to it and they were trying to drag both of us down. He strongly suggested I block the numbers. I blocked them, but saved the screenshots because for the first time I started to feel like I didn't trust him. A few days later, I was in the hospital cafeteria when I overheard 2 nurses talking about Brooke's case. One of them mentioned that Brooke's broken ribs definitely didn't come from falling down the stairs. My nerves shot up in an instant. That didn't match with what Tyler or I had told the police. The thought that there could be actual evidence out there to prove that I lied and Tyler lied to me made me sick to my stomach. Not to mention the fact that Tyler was actually laying his hands on her. I knew at that moment I had to make things right. I owed it to Brooke to get her out of this safely, just like my mom had. My career as a hospital administrator, everything I'd worked for, could be destroyed. But then again, wasn't Brooke's life worth more than my career? That night, I couldn't sleep. My bedroom felt stifling despite the cool autumn air drifting through the cracked window. I kept thinking about my mom, about how she'd finally found the courage to stand up to my dad with our help. The memory of her bruised face, the way she'd flinch at sudden movements came flooding back with painful clarity. I thought about Brooke, alone and injured, probably scared that no one would believe her, just like my mom had been. The parallel was too stark to ignore. Around 2 a.m., I finally made a decision. The bedside lamp cast a warm glow as I grabbed my laptop and started researching what happens to people who give false statements to police. The potential consequences were serious: obstruction of justice charges, perjury, even jail time. Each article I read made my heart sink further. But the alternative, letting Tyler get away with hurting Brooke, was worse. The weight of my complicity pressed down on me like a physical burden. I was about to close my laptop when a notification popped up. A new email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "I know you lied for him." The words seemed to pulse on the screen, accusatory and ominous. My hands shook as I opened it. There was no message, just an attachment. I hesitated before clicking on it, terrified of what I might see. It was a video file. I pressed play, and my heart nearly stopped. It was security camera footage from what looked like an apartment building hallway. The grainy black and white video showed a familiar corridor with numbered doors. The timestamp showed 10:17 p.m. on September 15th, the night I claimed Tyler was with me. And there he was, clear as day, pounding on a door. The video had no sound, but I could see he was yelling, his face contorted with rage, a vein bulging in his forehead. Eventually, the door opened slightly, and a woman's arm reached out, like she was trying to keep him out. Tyler shoved the door hard, forcing his way inside. The door closed behind him. I watched the timestamp continue to run, my breath caught in my throat. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The hallway remained empty, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. At 10:52 p.m., the door opened again, and Tyler emerged. He looked different, agitated, fixing his clothes, running a hand through his disheveled hair. He glanced up at the camera for a brief moment, then hurried down the hall, disappearing from view. At the end of the video, a message appeared. "Brooke needs your help. Do the right thing." I sat there, frozen, staring at my screen. The blue light illuminated my face in the darkness of my bedroom. There was no denying it anymore. Tyler had lied to me, used our friendship and our pact to manipulate me into providing him an alibi for something terrible he'd done, and I'd fallen for it. The realization made me feel hollow, like something essential had been scooped out of me. I barely slept that night. When I did drift shift off, I had nightmares about Brooke's face, bruised and accusing, morphing into my mother's. The next morning, I called in sick to work again and drove to the police station. The building looked more intimidating in daylight, all concrete and glass, a physical manifestation of the justice system I'd helped subvert. I asked for Detective Rivera, prepared to tell him everything and face the consequences, but the officer at the desk told me he wasn't available and asked if I wanted to speak with someone else. I lost my nerve and left, promising myself I'd come back later, hating myself for my cowardice. As I was walking to my car, my phone rang. It was Tyler. Seeing his name on my screen made my stomach clench. "I need to see you," he said without preamble, his voice tense. "Can you meet me at the park near your place? It's important." I agreed, even though every instinct told me not to. I needed to confront him about the video, to hear what he had to say for himself. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. The thoughts felt hollow even as they formed. The park was mostly empty when I arrived, the autumn leaves crunching beneath my feet as I walked along the path. Tyler was sitting on a bench near the pond, wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy day. He looked terrible, unshaven, his clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them, his usually neat hair unwashed and sticking up at odd angles. I sat down beside him, keeping some distance between us. He immediately launched into a story about how Brooke was escalating her lies, how the police were harassing him, how his life was falling apart. I let him talk, watching his face carefully. He was the same Tyler I'd always known, my childhood best friend, but somehow he also seemed like a complete stranger. There was a hardness to his jaw, a coldness in his voice that I'd never noticed before, or maybe I just never wanted to see it. When he finally paused for breath, I told him about the video. His reaction told me everything I needed to know. He didn't deny it existed or claim it was fake. Instead, his face hardened, and he asked who sent it to me, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Does it matter?" I asked. "Is it real, Tyler?" He took off his sunglasses, and I saw his eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with red. "You don't understand what she did to me," he said. "She was cheating. She humiliated me. She deserved it." His voice was flat, matter of fact, as if he were discussing something mundane rather than admitting to assault. I felt sick. This wasn't the Tyler I thought I knew. Or maybe this was who he'd been all along, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. The boy who'd helped me protect my mother suddenly seemed like an illusion, a character he'd played to win my loyalty. "I'm going to tell Detective Rivera the truth," I said, standing up. "I can't be part of this." Tyler grabbed my wrist, hard. His fingers dug into my skin, and I felt a flicker of fear. "You can't do that," he said, his voice low and threatening. "If you go down, I go down, and I'll make sure everyone knows you lied for me. Your job, your reputation, it'll all be gone." I pulled my arm away, suddenly afraid of him in a way I'd never been before. A duck landed on the pond nearby, the splash of water incongruously peaceful against the tension of the moment. "I'll take my chances," I said, backing away, rubbing my wrist where I could still feel the imprint of his fingers. "What about Jake?" he called after me, his voice carrying across the empty park. "How do you think he'll feel when he finds out his big sister is just like their dad, a liar who protects abusers?" That hit me like a physical blow. The comparison to my father, the man whose violence had shaped our childhood, made me feel physically ill. I hurried to my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. The drive home passed in a blur, the familiar streets of my neighborhood seeming alien and hostile. When I got home, Dana was there, looking worried. She was still in her scrubs, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Where have you been?" she asked. "The hospital called. They said you didn't show up for your meeting with the board." I'd completely forgotten about the meeting. It was for a promotion I'd been working toward for months, a chance to move into nursing management. Missing it probably meant I could kiss that opportunity goodbye. Another casualty of Tyler's lies. "What's going on with you lately?" Dana pressed, following me into the kitchen where I poured myself a glass of water with trembling hands. "You've been acting weird for weeks. Is it Tyler? Is he bothering you again?" I broke down and told her everything. The pact, the lie, the video, Tyler's threats. The words poured out of me in a torrent as we sat at our small kitchen table. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing more concerned with each detail. By the time I finished, tears were streaming down my face, and Dana had moved her chair closer to mine, her hand resting supportively on my arm. "You have to go to the police," she said when I finished. "Right now. This guy is dangerous." "I know," I said, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. "But what if he's right? What if I lose everything?" Dana grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at her. "Listen to me. You made a mistake because you felt you owed him. But covering for him now, knowing what he did, that's a choice. And it's not who you are." She was right. I knew what I had to do. The clarity of it was almost a relief after weeks of doubt and fear. The next morning, I went back to the police station. This time, Detective Rivera was there. He didn't seem surprised to see me. He led me to a small interview room, the same one where I'd given my false statement. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I need to change my statement," I told him, my voice steadier than I expected. "I lied before. Tyler wasn't with me that night." The detective nodded slowly. "I know," he said. "We have the security footage from Brooke's building, and from the Thai restaurant you claimed to order from. No record of your order, no sign of Tyler on any of their cameras." I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. "Am I going to be arsted?" The question hung in the air between us. "That depends," he said, "on how cooperative you are from this point forward." I told him everything, about our childhood friendship, the pact, the call in the middle of the night. I showed him the video that had been emailed to me and the threatening text Tyler had sent since our meeting in the park. By the time I finished, I felt drained but somehow lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. Detective Rivera explained that while giving a false statement was serious, they were more interested in building their case against Tyler. If I was willing to testify about his manipulation and threats, they might be able to avoid charging me. The relief I felt was tempered by the knowledge that I still had a long road ahead. As I was leaving the station, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Brooke wants to meet you. Coffee shop on Main Street, 2 p.m. I showed Detective Rivera, who advised against going alone. "We can have an officer nearby," he suggested, "just in case." I agreed, though I wasn't sure what just in case meant. Was Tyler dangerous enough that I needed police protection now? The thought sent a chill down my spine. The coffee shop was crowded when I arrived, filled with the comforting aroma of espresso and the gentle hum of conversation. I spotted Brooke immediately, sitting in a corner booth, a baseball cap pulled low over her face. Even with the hat, I could see the fading bruises around her eye and cheek, yellow and purple against her pale skin. She looked up as I approached, her expression guarded. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly as I slid into the seat across from her. Her fingers nervously traced the rim of her coffee cup. "I'm so sorry," I blurted out, "for lying, for not believing you." She nodded, accepting my apology without quite forgiving me yet. "I got your number from the detective," she explained. "He told me you changed your statement." "I should have done it sooner," I admitted, shame washing over me anew. "Why did you lie for him?" she asked, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly as she held her cup. The question wasn't accusatory, just curious. I told her about our history, about what Tyler had done for my family, about the pact. It sounded hollow even to my own ears. Not a justification, just an explanation. As I spoke, I could see understanding dawn in her eyes, though not necessarily forgiveness. "He was different when we first met," Brooke said after I finished. "Charming, attentive. But then he started getting jealous, checking my phone, showing up up at my workplace unannounced. The night it happened wasn't the first time he got physical, just the worst. Her story was so familiar it made my chest ache. It was my parents all over again. How had I not seen it? The signs had been there. Tyler's possessiveness, his quick temper, the way he'd talk about women who disrespected him. The detective thinks there might be other women, she continued, lowering her voice. Tyler has a pattern. He finds someone vulnerable, isolates them, then she didn't need to finish. I understood all too well. The cycle of absea was something I'd witnessed firsthand growing up. As we were talking, I noticed a man enter the coffee shop. He was wearing a hoodie pulled up despite the warm day and dark sunglasses. Something about his movement seemed familiar, the way he carried himself, the slight hunch of his shoulders. I tensed, suddenly certain it was Tyler. The man ordered at the counter, then turned, scanning the room. His gaze stopped on our table, and even through the sunglasses, I could feel the intensity of his stare. It was definitely Tyler. My heart hammered against my ribs. We need to go, I whispered to Brooke. Tyler's here. Her face went pale. How did he know? I had no idea, but it didn't matter. I texted the officer Detective Rivera had stationed nearby. Tyler is in the coffee shop, blue hoodie, sunglasses. I saw the officer enter a moment later, casually positioning himself near the door. Tyler must have noticed too, because he suddenly abandoned his order and headed for the side exit, moving quickly through the crowded shop. The next few days were a blur. Detective Rivera called to tell me they'd arrested Tyler trying to leave town. They found texts on his phone to friends asking them to intimidate witnesses, including messages planning to scare Brooke into dropping the charges. There were also messages to someone about hacking my email to track my movements. The depth of his deception was staggering. The case against him was building quickly. In addition to Brooke, 2 other ex-girlfriends had come forward with similar stories. The prosecutor wanted me to testify about Tyler's manipulation and how he'd pressured me to provide a false alibi. I agreed, even though the thought of facing him in court terrified me. I also had to deal with the fallout at work. My boss was understanding once I explained the situation, but the promotion was off the table for now. I'd have to rebuild trust, prove myself all over again. It seemed a small price to pay compared to what Brooke and the others had suffered. The hardest part was telling my mom and Jake. I'd been avoiding their calls, ashamed of what I'd done. When I finally worked up the courage to visit them, I broke down as soon as I walked through the door. The familiar smell of my childhood home, my mom's lavender candles, the faint scent of Jake's cologne, made the confession even more painful. My mom held me while I cried, just like she used to when I was little. When I finished explaining everything, she didn't yell or lecture me. She just said, "We all make mistakes, honey. What matters is that you fixed it." Her forgiveness was almost harder to bear than anger would have been. Jake was quieter, processing everything I'd told them. He sat on the arm of the couch, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he said, "I always thought Tyler was a hero for helping us back then. I guess people aren't always what they seem." No, I agreed. They're not. A week before the preliminary hearing, I received another email from the anonymous address that had sent me the video. This time, it contained a voice recording. Tyler on the phone with someone, bragging about how he'd put that betch in her place, and how he had me wrapped around his finger because of some stupid pact we made as kids. His voice was cold, calculating, completely at odds with the friend I thought I knew. I forwarded it to Detective Rivera immediately. He called back within the hour, sounding more animated than I'd ever heard him. "This is exactly what we needed," he said. "Between this and the testimony from you and the other victims, Tyler's looking at serious time." The recording was the final piece I needed to fully accept the truth. The Tyler I thought I knew, my childhood best friend who'd helped save my family, was gone. Maybe he'd never really existed at all. The thought was painful, but liberating. The night before I was scheduled to testify, Dana organized a small gathering at our apartment. Just my mom, Jake, and a few close friends. It wasn't a celebration exactly, more of a show of support. Our small living room felt warm and safe, filled with people who cared about me despite my mistakes. As we sat around talking, I realized something important. The pact I'd made with Tyler all those years ago had been based on trust and friendship. Both of those were gone now. I wasn't betraying our pact by testifying against him. He had already shattered it by using it to manipulate me into covering up his crime. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt certain I was doing the right thing. No matter what happened in court tomorrow, I would tell the truth. I owed that to Brooke, to the other women Tyler had hurt, and to myself. I spent the night before my testimony barely sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tyler's face. Not the angry version from the park, but the kid who shared his lunch with me in second grade, the friend who helped me through the worst time in my life. I kept wondering if there were signs I'd missed, red flags I'd ignored because I was so blinded by loyalty and gratitude. The courthouse was intimidating, all marble floors and elevated ceilings. I sat on a bench outside the courtroom, my hands fidgeting with the strap of my purse. My mom and Jake had offered to come, but I told them to stay home. This was something I needed to face alone. Dana had dropped me off with a tight hug and a promise to pick me up afterward. Detective Rivera spotted me and came over. He looked different in a suit, more formal but somehow less intimidating than when he was in his detective clothes. "You ready for this?" he asked, sitting next to me. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The truth was, I wasn't ready at all. The thought of seeing Tyler, of having to look him in the eye while I testified against him, made me feel physically suck. "Just tell the truth," Rivera said, like he could read my thoughts. "That's all you need to do." Easy for him to say. He wasn't about to betray his oldest friend, but then I reminded myself that Tyler had betrayed me first, had used our friendship to manipulate me into lying for him. The realization strengthened my resolve. When they called me in, the courtroom felt smaller than I expected. Tyler sat at the defense table, wearing a button-up shirt I'd never seen before. He looked almost like a stranger. His eyes locked with mine as I walked to the witness stand, and I felt a chill run down my spine. There was no warmth there, no recognition of our shared history, just cold calculation. I swore to tell the truth, then sat down. The prosecutor, a woman named Melissa with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, approached. She asked me about my relationship with Tyler, about our pact, about the night he called me. I answered everything honestly, my voice growing steadier with each question. When she played the recording of Tyler bragging about manipulating me, I watched his face. He didn't even flinch, just stared straight ahead like he was bored. Tyler's lawyer tried to paint me as an unreliable witness. He brought up my initial false statement, suggested I was changing my story to save myself from charges. But Melissa countered by having me explain the pact, the manipulation, the threats. By the time I stepped down, I felt drained but somehow lighter. As I walked past the defense table, Tyler whispered something only I could hear. "You're dead to me." The words stung more than they should have. I'd already accepted that our friendship was over, but hearing him say it made it final. Outside the courtroom, I ran into Brooke. She looked better than the last time I'd seen her. The bruises had faded, and there was a determination in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She thanked me for testifying, and I apologized again for not believing her initially. "We both got fooled by him," she said with a sad smile. "The important thing is we're both standing up to him now." She was right. As we walked out of the courthouse together, I felt a strange sense of solidarity with this woman I barely knew. We'd both been victims of Tyler's manipulation, just in different ways. The next few weeks were a roller coaster. The preliminary hearing led to a full trial, scheduled for 3 months later. Tyler was denied bail after the prosecutor presented evidence that he'd been planning to flee the country. I tried to focus on work, on rebuilding my life, but it was hard with the trial looming. My boss at the hospital was surprisingly understanding once I explained everything. The promotion was still off the table for now, but she assured me I'd have other opportunities once this was all behind me. My coworkers were a mixed bag. Some were supportive, others clearly gossiped behind my back. I overheard one nurse in the break room saying I must have known what Tyler was doing all along. It hurt, but I tried to ignore it. Dana was my rock through everything. She fielded calls from reporters who somehow got our number, screened my emails for anything from Tyler's friends, and made sure I ate when I forgot to. One night, after a particularly rough day when Tyler's lawyer had called to remind me about the penalties for perjury, she sat me down with a glass of wine. "You know you're doing the right thing, right?" she asked, her eyes serious. I nodded, swirling the wine in my glass. "I know, it's just hard. Of course it's hard. You're standing up to someone who manipulated you for years, but you're stronger than he is. Always have been." Her confidence in me helped more than she knew. I started seeing a therapist, trying to untangle the mess of emotions around Tyler and our friendship. Dr. Lewis helped me see that the pact we made as teenagers wasn't some sacred bond. It was just two scared kids trying to protect each other. And somewhere along the way, Tyler had twisted it into something toxic. 2 weeks before the trial, I got a text from an unknown number. "Back off or everyone at the hospital sees the video." My blood ran cold. "What video?" I showed it to Detective Rivera, who traced it to one of Tyler's friends, a guy named Robert I'd met a few times over the years. They brought him in for questioning, and he cracked immediately, admitting Tyler had put him up to it. There was no video. It was just an empty threat to scare me. The trial itself was brutal. Tyler's lawyer painted him as a victim of vindictive women and overzealous prosecution. He tried to discredit Brooke by bringing up her history of depression, as if that somehow made her less credible. When the other ex-girlfriends testified about similar patterns of absence, he suggested they were copying each other's stories for attention. I sat in the courtroom every day, even when I wasn't testifying. Tyler never looked at me, not once. It was like I'd ceased to exist for him. In a way, that made it easier. The person on trial wasn't my childhood friend anymore. He was a stranger who happened to wear Tyler's face. The prosecution's case was strong. Between the medical evidence, the testimony from multiple victims, the recording of Tyler bragging about manipulating me, and the threats he'd made afterward, it was hard to see how the jury could find him anything but guilty. Still, I was nervous. I'd seen enough TV shows to know that sometimes the bad guys got away. On the day the verdict was announced, the courtroom was packed. I sat between Dana and my mom, with Jake on mom's other side. They'd insisted on being there, forming a protective circle around me. Brooke sat a few rows ahead with her sister. The tension in the room was so thick it felt hard to breathe. When the jury foreman stood and read guilty on all counts, I felt tears spring to my eyes. Not tears of joy or relief, but something more complicated. Grief for the friendship I'd lost, for the person I thought Tyler was, mixed with validation that I'd done the right thing by coming forward. Tyler showed no reaction to the verdict, just stared straight ahead like he had throughout the trial. As they led him away in handcuffs, he finally looked at me. There was no remorse in his eyes, no recognition of our shared history, just cold hatred. I held his gaze until he disappeared through the door. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Dana pushed through them, creating a path for me to follow. I kept my head down, ignoring their questions. This wasn't about me or my 15 minutes of fame. It was about justice for Brooke and the others. Later that night, we had a small gathering at my apartment, just family and close friends. It wasn't a celebration exactly, more of a collective exhale after months of tension. As I looked around at the people who'd supported me through everything, I felt a surge of gratitude. These were my real friends, the ones who stood by me even when I made mistakes. Jake pulled me aside at one point, his expression serious. "I used to think Tyler was this hero for helping us with Dad," he said quietly. "I idolized him." "Me too," I admitted. "That's why it was so hard to see who he really was. But you did see it eventually, and you did something about it. That makes you the hero in this story, sis." His words caught me off guard. I'd never thought of myself that way, as someone brave or heroic. I'd just been trying to fix a terrible mistake I'd made. But looking at it through Jake's eyes, I could see a different perspective. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Brooke. "Coffee? Same place as before?" I agreed, curious about what she wanted to talk about. The coffee shop was quieter this time, just a few students with laptops and an elderly couple reading newspapers. Brooke looked different. Her hair was shorter, and there was a confidence in her posture that hadn't been there before. She smiled when she saw me, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said as I sat down across from her, "for everything you did. The detective told me that without your testimony and that recording, Tyler might have walked." I shook my head. "I should have come forward sooner. I'm sorry I didn't believe you at first. You believed him because he was your friend, because he helped you once. That's not a crime." She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Actually, I wanted to ask you something. I'm starting a support group for survivors of domestic violence. Would you consider coming to speak? Your perspective is unique. You saw it from both sides." The request surprised me. "I'm not sure what I could offer," I said honestly. "I made so many mistakes." "Exactly. People need to hear that. They need to know that good people can make bad choices when they're manipulated by someone they trust. And they need to know it's never too late to make things right." I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, I'll do it." As I walked home from the coffee shop, I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of Tyler's betrayal, of my own complicity, was still there, but it didn't feel crushing anymore. I'd made a terrible mistake out of misplaced loyalty, but I'd also found the courage to fix it. That counted for something. My phone buzzed with a text from Dana. "Dinner tonight? Linda and Charles are coming over." Linda was Dana's girlfriend, and Charles was their friend from college who'd been helping me navigate the legal system. I texted back a quick yes with a smiley face. Life was slowly getting back to normal. I'd started applying for positions at other hospitals, thinking a fresh start might be good. My therapist thought it was a healthy step forward. I wasn't running away from what happened. I was moving towards something new. That evening, as I walked into our apartment building, I ran into our neighbor Sarah. She was in her 60s, a retired teacher who always had a kind word for everyone. She'd been following the trial in the news and had left encouraging notes under our door several times. "I saw the verdict," she said, her eyes warm. "You did a brave thing, standing up to him like that." "It didn't feel brave," I admitted. "Most of the time I was terrified. That's what courage is, dear. Being afraid but doing the right thing anyway." She patted my arm. "You should be proud of yourself." As I continued up the stairs to our apartment, I thought about her words. Maybe she was right. Maybe bravery wasn't about being fearless. It was about facing your fears and doing what needed to be done anyway. The apartment was filled with the smell of Dana's famous lasagna when I walked in. Linda was setting the table, and Charles was opening a bottle of wine. They all looked up and smiled when I entered, and in that moment, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Peace. Not happiness exactly. I was still processing everything that had happened, but a quiet certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be, surrounded by people who cared about me. "Just in time," Dana said, pulling the lasagna from the oven. "How was your day?" "Good," I said, and meant it. Actually, it was really good. As we sat down to eat, I realized something important. The pact pact I'd made with Tyler all those years ago had been based on blind loyalty. But true friendship, the kind I had with Dana, with my family, with the people around this table, was based on something stronger. Trust, honesty, and the courage to hold each other accountable. That was a lesson worth learning, even if it had come at such an elevated cost.